This is the regime that kidnapped the 6-year-old Dalai Lama in an effort to eliminate the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. This is the regime that murdered student activists in Hong Kong, set up concentration camps in Xinjiang, and facilitated genocide in Sudan. And most importantly, this is the regime that conspired to create and release and maliciously conceal the biological weapon known as COVID-19 at the end of 2019. To give you an idea of how serious this attack has been, consider it relative to another historic attack on the American heartland. On December 7th, 1941, a surprise attack by the Japanese Air Force on the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor killed 2,403 Americans. In response, Congress immediately issued a declaration of war against the formidable Japanese Empire. As of this moment, approximately 250,000 Americans have been killed, and countless more have been permanently maimed by the CCP virus. That is more than 100 times the amount of American dead at Pearl Harbor. More than 1/3 of small businesses have been permanently shuttered. Unemployment has skyrocketed, and the results of a U.S. presidential election have been fundamentally altered. This impacts our allies abroad significantly more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, without a doubt, an act of war, not just on the United States of America, but on the human race. The reasoning behind this most recent CCP atrocity is quite obvious. President Trump poses a grave threat to the Chinese Communist Party. He always has. By the middle of 2019, his trade war and his hawkish diplomatic policy had brought the speedy growth of the CCP's power abroad to a complete standstill. Initially, they were optimistic that they wouldn't need to survive 4 more years of President Trump. Sex scandals, Kavanaugh, Russiagate, impeachment, the list goes on and on and on. But the beauty of the American Republic is that at the end of the day, the people decide the president. And the people loved Donald Trump. The CCP knew that with the economic and political stability the United States had in 2019, President Trump would easily cruise to re-election in 2020. And this could not be allowed to happen. For an incumbent to lose, you need political unrest and a bad economy. So the CCP resolved to create those conditions in the United States. So, after almost 5 years of study in a P4 infectious diseases lab in Wuhan, SARS-CoV-2, aka COVID-19, aka the CCP virus, a man-made viral bioweapon, was released. Whether this release was intentional or accidental remains unclear, but the deliberate spread of the virus to cities across the globe, along with the deliberate misinformation and cover-up campaigns by the CCP and WHO, were unequivocally intentional and malicious in nature. The CCP never lets a good crisis go to waste. This was a targeted attack on the global economy, designed specifically to oust President Trump from office 4 years early. Mr. Miles Guo called this for what it was before I had even heard of COVID-19. But it took the testimony of whistleblower virologist Dr. Li Minyan to get me to believe him. Dr. Yan, a successful coronavirus researcher from mainland China, said she was employed at a university in Hong Kong when she first became aware of what was described as a SARS-like disease spreading through central China. The more information Yan learned, the more she felt the scrutiny of the red bureaucratic machine, which seemed interested in keeping this information quiet. She was told not to ask questions of her colleagues or pursue research outside of that which she was assigned. COVID-19, at this point, still a preventable humanitarian crisis, had been compartmentalized by the Chinese government. But as time went on, Dr. Yan realized that this SARS-like disease had the potential to tear across the globe, becoming a global pandemic. When Dr. Yan pointed out to higher-ups that human-to-human transmission was possible, they dismissed her. Shortly after, the World Health Organization, at the behest of the CCP, erroneously claimed that human-to-human transmission was not possible. The CCP refused to allow foreign experts to review their data, let alone come to Wuhan. The fix was in, and Dr. Yan felt it. It was at this point that she realized the malicious intentions of the CCP. With the help of some expatriate Chinese sympathizers, Mr. Guo included, she relocated here to the United States of America. She launched a massive media campaign, even appearing on Tucker Carlson Tonight, the most popular cable news program in human history, where she told viewers that this virus was man-made and spread intentionally. She has absolutely no reason to lie, zero reason to say any of these things apart from her moral convictions. And in fact, for her efforts, she has been rewarded with attempts on her life and the lives of her family members. The novel coronavirus, referred to formally as SARS-CoV-2, is a relative of the coronavirus that swept through China during the Bush and Obama administrations, SARS-CoV-1. This older coronavirus, referred to colloquially as SARS, has a significantly higher mortality rate and raised alarm in the scientific community for its potential to become a pandemic. Then, as now, the CCP was less than forthcoming about the scale and nature of the local outbreaks that they were managing. This put Western leaders on the back foot, and our pandemic protocols were thoroughly evaluated. But because of the nature of this disease, it was easy to identify and address local outbreaks. SARS was quickly contained, and no significant outbreaks occurred in the Western Hemisphere. Crisis averted. SARS-CoV-1, as I mentioned earlier, has a very high mortality rate, 10% in China, and was not as infectious as its modern cousin. This made human-to-human transmission slow and outbreaks more noticeable. SARS-CoV-2, on the other hand, the CCP virus, has a very low mortality rate comparatively, under 1% in the United States of America, and it is extremely infectious. With a long incubation period and the potential for asymptomatic carriers, COVID-19 was able to spread like wildfire through the Chinese mainland and then to all corners of the world. The disease was virtually undetected until late December. By that time, it had already begun community spread in major cities like New York, New York, Los Angeles, California, Milan, Italy, Tokyo, Japan, and Seoul, South Korea. The only people with access to any information about the virus were PLA military virologists in Hong Kong and Wuhan, and top-level Chinese government officials. According to Dr. Yan, who is studying coronavirus infections at the P3 Infectious Diseases Lab in Hong Kong, subordinates in the Chinese scientific community were aware of this SARS-like disease spreading throughout central China, but were told to keep their questions and research to themselves. Between the time the world became aware of the pandemic and the beginning of the next year, top party and WHO officials orchestrated a deliberate misinformation campaign, underreporting case and death numbers in China, falsely claiming that human-to-human transmission was not possible, and creating a mysterious origin story for the virus. It came from a wet market in Wuhan, the wet market that just happens to be blocks away from the only P4 virology laboratory in mainland China. But what does all of this have to do with the state of our nation today? Well, now, here we are, month 11 of the global pandemic. Our economy has been effectively crippled. Political unrest turned violent has ravaged the nation since June. Over the course of many spending bills, the federal government has spent trillions of dollars on economic recovery, and it doesn't appear to be working. Evictions and rent collection have stopped. Mortgage payments have stopped. My university, along with countless others in blue states, is closed. Police have stopped enforcing laws and started enforcing social distancing and mask-wearing guidelines. Everywhere I go, except right here, right now,